honorable, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. It's not enough to simply say, yes, we're doing the honorable thing before God. You also need to have a sense of honorability or accountability before men. Paul was thinking about the precedent that he was setting. With every decision a person makes, you are setting a precedent. You are setting down a plan, an example for the future. And so with this collection, Paul wanted to make sure that he set a proper precedent before God and before men, that it was accountable, that it was honorable, and that it was the right thing to do. Now in verse 22, he says, we have sent them with our brother, and the brother that he refers to here is Titus, whom we have often tested and found diligent in many things. Titus had been with Paul through significant ministry efforts. He'd been tested, I'm sure, in small things and been found diligent, and now he was being entrusted with this greater responsibility and the leadership. He says, but now even more diligent because of his great confidence in you. Verse 23, as for Titus, he is my partner. The word partner is a person with a common commitment to serve in ministry. Paul didn't throw these terms around loosely. If he called you a partner, you are somebody who was as committed to ministry as he was. He is my partner, and he is my fellow worker among you. A fellow worker is a person who's a teammate, willing to work very, very hard. It's difficult to be teamed up with somebody who doesn't have the kind of commitment or work ethic that you do, whether it's a sporting event. You know, if you're playing soccer as a team, and you've got one or two people out there who are just, I remember years ago, watching as some of my kids went through soccer, and, you'd see one little boy out there doing this on the soccer lines, and he's just kind of looking around and enjoying the sky. I mean, I've watched kids sit down and look at the clouds while looking, and, that's a little frustrating if you're a teammate and you're wanting to win. Or if you're part of a team and you're just an individual out to, show your own stuff. Or some of you experience this in, offices or in your corporations or in your teams. You got some people that don't want to carry their load, don't want to work, and that means you're going to have to work all the harder. Paul says Titus was a fellow worker. He was somebody who pulled his own in this ministry. And he says, as for our brethren, they are messengers of the churches. These other men who had been appointed as this collection team, the Greek word is the word for apostle. But it's not a technical term as if they were apostles like Peter and Paul and James and John. But they were representatives. They were there to represent the churches, and they were to do it all, it says, verse 23, for the glory to Christ. Verse 24, therefore, openly before the churches, show them the proof of your love and our reason for boasting about you. Paul wanted this to be an open and a public kind of thing so that there would be no, two sets of books or uncertainty about the amount that was being given. Chapter 9, verses 1 through 5. Paul does not need to write to them about this ministry to the saints because he's already encouraged them several times. 2 Corinthians 9:1, he says, for it is superfluous, it is redundant for me to write to you about this ministry to the saints. For I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the Macedonians, namely that Achaia has been prepared since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. The Corinthians' commitment to this collection, to this offering, had encouraged other people to do this. The word for stirred up is one that we're probably familiar with. It's taking a fire. A fire, as it burns down, it gets very, very hot coals in the middle, and you don't see the flames anymore. But if you want to stir up that flame, if you want to get it going again, what do? You stir up those those hot coals, and you blow some wind through it, and then up comes the flame, and it begins to spread out again. And that's what the Corinthians were concerning this offering. They were the people who had stirred it and who had gotten it going. Verse 3, "But I have sent the brethren in order that our boasting about you may not be made empty in this case, so that, as I was saying, you may be prepared. Otherwise, if the Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared," and what does it mean to be unprepared? To be unprepared means that they would not have gathered the offering together. Now, what did Paul tell them were the principles of Christian stewardship? He said, you periodically, on the first day of the week, you personally, you privately, you accumulate and you save, you do it proportionately, and you do it in an accountable fashion. So that when we come together, I'm not having to wait around and beg you or whatever to bring this offering together, but that you're ready, that you've been exercising Christian stewardship over your financial management. So he says that when he comes with the Macedonians, he doesn't want to find them unprepared. He says, we, not to speak of you, will be put to shame by this confidence. So you can sense that Paul is confident, but he's not overconfident, is he? He understands, I think, human nature, we're going to see in the next verse. So he says, look, make sure that you get ready, because I don't want to come and be embarrassed. More importantly, you don't want to be embarrassed or put to shame by not being ready. Verse 5, or I should make this principle. Paul has this principle, and I've mentioned it before. It is not what is expected that gets done, but what is inspected. Remember? It is not what is expected that gets done, but what is inspected. And Paul is getting ready to inspect. Verse 5, so I thought it was necessary to urge the brethren that they would go on ahead to you and arrange beforehand your previously promised bountiful gift, so that the same would be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by covetousness. So although Paul's confident, he's going to send this team ahead to help get them prepared, to make sure that they're ready, so that when he arrives, there's no delay. And he's concerned about one big thing getting in the way of the offering, and that is the term of covetousness. See, Paul wants them to have a generous gift, not a grudging gift. 1 Timothy 6, verse 9 says this, but those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some longing for it, coveting for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Jesus said it this way in Luke 12:15. Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. The fact of the matter is your possessions end up possessing you. Boy, Jesus couldn't have said it any better, could he? Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. Now, what is greed? What is covetousness? It's wanting something for yourself instead of understanding that it is a stewardship from God to be used for his glory. And that makes all the difference in the world. There are people with billions of dollars and they have no abundance of life. There are people with billions of dollars and they have total abundance of life. What's the difference? Understanding what belongs to them and what belongs to God. There are people with nothing that have abundance of life because they understand that life does not abound in things. Jesus warns us, beware. So Paul wants this bountiful gift to come, but not grudgingly. Because God, we're going to learn, loves the cheerful giver. So he's bringing this collection to a close so that he can reach out to the people and to the churches of Jerusalem. Well, let's review the application of this particular sections that we've been studying by Paul. Paul has taught that Christian giving and Christian stewardship is periodic, it is personal, it is private, it is an accumulation, it is proportional, and that there should be an accountability. Paul tells us that giving is an act of sacrificial worship. Giving is a loving commitment to God and to others. Stewardship is a spiritual discipline of a lifetime. It is understanding that things belong to God and that he has entrusted them to me for his honor and glory. Financial accountability with checks and balances is a biblical principle. That is why twice a year we at Berean Bible Church gather together and the books are open for those who are members to make sure that things are being held accountable. That is why we have a yearly audit of all receipts and such things. That's why all charitable and particularly Christian organizations ought to have such checks and balances, because it is the right way to do things. We avoid criticism, Paul would say, and we will not be discredited. Finally, the theology of health, wealth, and prosperity preaching is a theology of greed. It is a theology of covetousness. It is a theology of self-indulgence, and it is a theology of self-delusion. And it is a major theology of television and radio and self-help Christian books these days. We do not give to get. We give back to God. That is what we do. And yet today, a major section, cross-section of our brothers and sisters of Christ have bought into the theology of greed, covetousness, self-indulgence, and self-delusion. And it's very, very sad. Again, we do not give to get, but we give to give back to God as good stewards. So, on some kind of a missionary project, of setting it aside so that you can do things at times on mission projects or other things of life. Those of us who are adults, I understand, I consider it a glorious day when in the mail there is not a bill. That's just like a special day. When you get the mail and there's only junk mail. But in spite of all of that, we need to exercise stewardship by making sure that all of our resources are at the disposal of the Lord. Let's pray.